Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Good evening. I am here to tell you that you have no chance. None whatsoever. Now, that's not quite as negative a statement as you might think. And in fact, if you look at it the right way, you might even see that it's ultimately an expression of not only hope, but of confidence in yourself. Because what I'm talking about is, of course, success as it is defined by the world. What are we told, especially in the United States? We're told about the American dream. Somebody who is obviously the most American-looking person in the world, someone I've never heard of, Sanford J. Weil, says, "I think the American dream says that anything can happen if you work hard enough at it and are persistent and have some ability. The sky is the limit to what you can build and what can happen to you and your family." Now, that's an interesting way of putting it, what can happen to you and your family. And I think Mr. Weil at least does express what most of us consider to be the American dream and what most of us consider to be the way that you succeed, which is have some talent, work hard, and good things will happen to you. You'll achieve the kind of things that you want to achieve. That's what we're supposed to believe, right? And yet, think about how many successful people you know are kind of mysteriously not all that talented. They're not all that skilled. Or think about the people that maybe you don't know directly, but you know of. Who's a better writer? John Scalzi or John C. Wright? It's not even close. It's not even a competition. John C. Wright's a much better writer. And he's not just a better writer, his books are more entertaining. And yet, which of those authors is being fronted by Audible and being used and pushed constantly? I'll give you a hint. It's not the outspoken Christian John C. Wright. And whether you look at music or you look at the world of acting and Hollywood, think about how many really good young actors or actresses that you've maybe noticed over time and have gone nowhere. Is it because they made bad choices? Is it because they didn't play the game? I mean, we don't know. We only see this stuff from the outside. But what we can see over and over and over again, especially in the world of politics, is what a bunch of hopelessly mediocre people seem to keep mysteriously finding themselves at the top of the heap. I mean, is there a single person in the world who would look at the collection of individuals in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives and say, hey, these are our finest leaders? I mean, what are the chances that the best leaders in the United States predominantly went to law school? Think about the lawyers you know, the people that you know that went to law school. Do they tend to strike you as the alphas, the real leaders, the winners? Not in my experience. Smarter than the average, sure. But particularly talented? No. And again and again and again, it doesn't matter what field we look at, what profession we look at, in both our personal lives and our professional lives, we just happen to keep noticing the same thing happening. The less intelligent, less successful, and quite often very personally undisciplined are the kind of people who keep somehow winding up with the plum positions, getting the good interviews, getting hired into excellent jobs. And then when they screw it up, as they often do, they stumble upwards. It's absolutely incredible to see how people who completely failed in one position actually get brought on and given more responsibility and more power, despite the fact that they clearly have no ability whatsoever to do the job that they've been hired to do. And I'm not talking about, the serial entrepreneurs here. I'm not talking about the people who start a company, it's unsuccessful, they start another one, it's unsuccessful, they start a third one, and the third time proves the charm. I'm not talking about that sort of thing. I'm talking about people that are known, proven, and repeated failures again and again and again. People have never had any success at anything. The what's her name? Carly from HP. She's never succeeded at anything. And yet she keeps getting put on corporate boards and made CEO this, CEO that. At this point in time, can you really even pretend to be surprised by the result? So the dream is this. Single mother, no job, working hard on her book, and it turns out to be a huge bestseller. Creates a multimedia empires, theme parks, movies, merchandise, everything. And all it took was a little hard work and talent, right? I'm dubious. I'm dubious in the extreme. I mean, I'm not going to go Miles Mathis on you here and tell you that J.K. Rowling is just the front figure for a team of MI6 agents with a literary bent. I have I have absolutely no reason to believe that, or to believe anything but that J.K. Rowling wrote the books herself. But the point is, the success of those books does not appear to be as organic as, say, the success of truly great literature like J.R.R. Tolkien, or some of the other legitimately great books of the genre like Dune, Frank Herbert. Books that didn't just explode into the consciousness around the world, but were passed on by word of mouth from author to author to author. How about this guy? You've heard, his story. Smarts, talent, hard work, even ruthless business instincts. Bill Gates. And yet you see the same sort of things, the same sort of strange little falling into place, being in the right place at the right time, etc., etc., etc. Now, Bill Gates is legitimately intelligent. Microsoft is a absolutely legitimate company. And yet, if you look at the background, you again and again see just little hints that maybe there's a little bit of assistance along the way. And what am I talking about? I'm talking, of course, about the concept that you've heard us describe before, you've heard me talk about before, as taking the ticket. Taking the ticket is a form of what's described in the Bible when Jesus is in the wilderness and he's offered all the cities of the world, all the power in the world, if only he will kneel down and worship the prince of this world. Of course, Jesus rejects the temptation and so forth, but I think it's very foolish to imagine that this same offer is not made, if not to everyone, at least to people who are talented and ambitious. And the thing is, it's not what most people think. It's not generally a story like the one that Lady Gaga tells, where she talks about how she was told that if she was willing to, give up her soul, that she would be given massive success, and that's why she has her massive success and so forth. And maybe that's true, or maybe she's just, being a melodramatic fame whore. Given that we're talking about a pop star who wants to dabble in acting, I suspect that the latter is probably much more likely to be the case. I'm both a Christian and a skeptic, which is kind of an interesting combination when we think about it. But the point is that the process is not generally a big dramatic one. And in fact, I've talked to a number of people who didn't realize until after the fact, sometimes decades after the fact, that they had been offered an opportunity to begin selling their soul. It's not a big dramatic thing. It's much more akin to this. It's much more akin to drug dealing. Your first taste is free. And what's offered to you is something small that's of appeal. And it can be anything. It can be anything that appeals to you. The commercial for this Paco Rabanne, it's called 1 Million and Lady Million. And it's kind of a visual explication of the concept at its crudest. You snap your fingers and boom, you have what you want. But it's not like that most of the time in real life. Most of the time, it's somebody just saying, hey, do you want this opportunity? And it's not always something related to immorality. It could be a record contract. It could be the chance to get your book published. It could be a collaboration with a musician that you admire. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with the initial offer. In fact, usually there isn't something that's necessarily wrong with it. But the question is, do you get hooked on it? And what do you do if there's the possibility that it's going to be taken away? And that's when the hook starts to be put in. The hook starts to dig in, to your mouth. Are you going to make that little change that they ask for? Are you going to take that reference to Jesus out? Are you going to go ahead and make that disciple black or a woman, or just that little thing? Dave Chappelle talked about how it's common for black actors, especially comedians, to be told to put on a dress at some point. Oh, it'll be funny. Just think about how funny it'll be. And he was really suspicious of this because why wasn't it in the script? Why was it dropped on him at the last minute? Now, I think the fact that Chappelle is doing $20 million Netflix specials when he's not even bothering to write all of his own jokes and sort of thing, I think that kind of tends to indicate that he may have found his way to going ahead and taking that ticket. Kind of looks that way. Because what we can see at the higher end, you can see when people have just completely sold their souls. You know, there's nobody that believes that Barack Obama is going to write a book that's worth a $65 million advance. Especially because Obama being Obama, he's almost certainly never going to write the book. You know, you see these characters like Mark Rancicotte, or however you pronounce his name, Republican governor of Montana, former chairman of the Republican National Committee. He actually came out and said that he's going to be voting for Biden. Well, you don't have to know much about the corruption of American politics to realize that any significant Republican figure who is actually going to publicly come out against a sitting Republican president doesn't own his own soul. You know, that's somebody who is wholly owned and is doing what they're told. You know, but like Jesus said, what does it profit a man to gain the world at the loss of his soul? And that's why I think it's so important to resist those temptations. That's why it's so important not to dabble in it. You know, I was talking to a girl once. She was pretty, really good voice, and she was a Christian, but she really wanted to be a popular singer. And she was talking about how, well, you know, she's just going to sing songs that, you know, they're not gospel songs and they don't, you know, mention God specifically, but, you know, she'll just kind of look at it as if, you know, the love song that she's singing is if she's singing it like she loves Jesus or something. I mean, that's somebody who you kind of have to assume is just going to end up selling their soul. They're going to end up taking the ticket. And, you know, it's fascinating to me, you know, to look back in hindsight and see when opportunities were either presented or denied in relation to what I'm talking about here. You know, I related this on the blog, but I was genuinely surprised when the St. Paul Pioneer Press told me that I was not going to get the open slot for their token conservative on the opinion editorial page. I mean, here I was one of their youngest writers. I was only the 6th writer in what was then the 150-year history of the paper to be nationally syndicated. And my column was popular. I wrote the game review column on the technology page. I'd even contributed to the opinion page before, you know, when they wanted something written on technology. So they knew I was good enough. I knew I was good enough. I was even a local. I'd grown up in a suburb of St. Paul. And yet, the editor told me flat out, you will never be given a spot on the editorial page. Well, what's the big deal about, you know, having a column on the editorial page of a maybe what, the it was probably the number 2 paper in like the 30th largest city in the country. Who cares, right? But what's going to happen to a 25-year-old opinion page writer? Well, within 10 years, he's probably going to be the editor of the page, and then probably go to a bigger paper, and then suddenly you're talking about somebody who's got considerable influence. Well, interestingly enough, the spot was filled in 1993 by a token conservative. He never wrote anything memorable that I can recall. 10 years later, he went to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, which is the largest paper there, and is now the commentary editor. So you have to give them credit for understanding, back in 1993, that I was not suitable from their perspective. And you really can't argue with that. Had nothing to do with Paco Rabanne. I just didn't want to cough at all of you. So what does it mean why you have no chance? Well, if you are a good person, if you are a moral person, if you're a Christian, you are not going to be allowed to succeed in the system past a certain level. It's just not going to happen. But it is very, very freeing to know this. You're not going to get the scholarship. You're probably not going to get the acceptance. You're not going to get the interview. So this means you have the imperative to go out and make things happen on your own. Because here's the magical thing about it. They can't create. They cannot create things that are good, beautiful, and true. They're predators and parasites. And so there's always going to be a certain amount of room that is granted to people who just do their own thing, or for people who just work outside the system, because that's where the positive change, the necessary positive change, is going to happen. I'm not saying that the society won't eventually decide to kill the geese that lay the golden eggs. You look at the histories of places like the Soviet Union, you look at Cambodia and so forth, and sometimes they'll just go off the deep end and just embrace the wickedness to the full and enact hell on earth. But that's a totally different problem. What we're dealing with here is the corruption of a society that is run by the wicked and run by the hedonists. They don't want everything to collapse. They're, probably going to make everything collapse just out of short-sightedness and greed, the way that all empires and societies collapse eventually. But that's not the goal for the most part. And so you can save a lot of time if you're a young man or a young woman and you're watching this. The beauty of this is that by knowing that you have no chance to succeed within the system, you can give yourself the opportunity to succeed without it. And the fact that you're never going to get that hand up, the fact that you're never going to get given that fake pseudo success, means that the success that you achieve will be real. You'll never have that imposter syndrome that they're always talking about. It makes me laugh when you see someone like John Scalzi writing about, even though I've published these books and done this and that, I have imposter syndrome. Of course you do, because you are an imposter. the success that you have isn't yours. I was told by a very established and successful science fiction author, Charles Stross, that I would never be published by any mainstream science fiction publisher after 2005. In 2005, Charles Stross told me that, and he was absolutely correct. And I actually appreciated what he was saying because it liberated me from wasting my time on seeking book deals at places like Pocket Books or talking to Random House and other publishers that had been interested in me. And I quickly learned that when an editor from one of those publishing houses would contact me and say, "Oh, we love you've got all these great ideas and you've got this great fan base and all this sort of thing. We'd love to publish one of your books." I knew it wasn't going to take long before somebody would have a quiet word with them in their office, and then I would get that, I guess we're not going to move forward. We've changed our strategy, or whatever the excuse was. But look what's happened since I quit wasting my time sending out book proposals to publishers. We started Castalia House. Out of that has come Arkhaven Comics. Out of that has come Castalia Library. And it's much more successful than if I just, signed a couple nice book deals with HarperCollins. And more to the point, it's all legitimately earned success. It wasn't given by anyone. It wasn't just handed out on a silver platter. It's much more satisfying, and it's much more stable. Because that's the thing. When you take the ticket, you're only useful as long as they deem you to be useful. And they will not hesitate to cast you aside. All you have to do is look at the long line of trashed people that have been cast out of cast from the high horse. This long list of bleeding and broken bodies. And so you have no chance to succeed in the realm of the wicked. But that knowledge frees you to pursue genuine, meaningful, and lasting success by pursuing the good, the beautiful, and the true. I'm Voxday. This is the Darkstream.